I need to start with a phone call. Not the one where everything came out. Not the one where my mother went quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not even the one where my father said my brother's name like it was something he was trying to put down gently. I want to start with a phone call from 7 years ago when my mother told me they couldn't help with my graduate school tuition that semester. She said it carefully. She said they were stretched thin. She said my father's back had been giving him trouble and there were some medical expenses. She said she was sorry. She said she knew the timing was difficult. I said it was fine. I meant it. I took out a loan, picked up extra hours at the campus library, and moved forward. That's what you do. That's what I had always done. I didn't think about that phone call again for 6 years. That detail would matter later. Let me tell you how my family was arranged, because the structure of it explains everything that followed. My parents, Gerald and Patrice, had been married for 31 years. They were not wealthy people, but they were stable. My father worked in logistics management for most of his career. My mother ran a small bookkeeping business from home. They owned their house outright. They had a joint savings account, a modest retirement fund, and a secondary account they called the family fund. Money set aside for emergencies, for helping the kids when needed, for whatever came up. I am the younger child by 4 years. My brother Marcus is 41. I am 37. Marcus had always been the one who needed more. Not because he was irresponsible exactly, or at least that's how my parents framed it. He had a talent for landing in situations that required rescue. A business that didn't work out. A lease that fell through. A gap between jobs that stretched longer than expected. Each time my parents were there. Each time, it was framed as temporary. I was the one who figured things out quietly. I had a stable career in project management. My husband David and I bought a small house 4 years ago. We weren't asking for anything. And because I wasn't asking, I think my parents assumed I didn't need. They weren't entirely wrong. But there's a difference between not needing and being overlooked. I didn't fully understand the size of that difference until I saw the numbers. The inciting moment wasn't dramatic. It was a Sunday dinner 14 months ago. Marcus was there with his girlfriend. My parents seemed relaxed. The food was good. And then at some point my father mentioned, almost in passing, that they had helped Marcus cover a shortfall on his car loan. I asked how much. My father said $4,000. My mother changed the subject smoothly. She was always good at that, and the conversation moved on. But I held on to that number quietly. 4,000. For a car loan shortfall. I thought about my graduate school tuition. I thought about the loan I was still paying down at the time. I thought about the medical expense explanation 7 years ago. I didn't say anything at the table. I almost let it go. But on the drive home, I mentioned it to David. He listened. Then he said something I had been thinking, but hadn't said out loud. He said, "Do you actually know how often this happens?" I didn't. That was the problem. The first boundary crossed wasn't by Marcus. It was by a pattern I had never thought to examine. I want to be precise here because I am not someone who looks for grievances. I had genuinely believed that my parents helped when help was needed, and that Marcus simply needed more help than I did. I had accepted that framing without question because questioning it felt disloyal. But David's question stayed with me. Do you actually know how often this happens? 2 weeks after that dinner, I called my mother on a Tuesday evening. Casually. I asked how they were doing. Asked about my father's health. And then I asked, gently, whether they were doing okay financially, whether all the support they gave Marcus over the years had put any strain on things. My mother paused. Then she said, "We manage. You know, we've always managed." I said, "I know. I just want to make sure you're okay." She said, "We're fine. Don't worry about it." That pause, though. That half-second before she answered. I had known my mother for 37 years. That pause was not nothing. I didn't push. I said goodnight. I hung up. And then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, thinking about a family fund I had never once been offered access to, and a brother who had been drawing from it for years. I still didn't know how much. I still didn't know how long. But I was going to find out. I want to explain how I got the statements, because people always ask this. My parents' primary bank was one I had been a customer of for over a decade. When my father had a minor health scare 3 years prior, my parents had added me as an authorized party on their joint account, not with spending access, but with the ability to request records if something happened to them. It was a practical decision made with good intentions. They had forgotten they'd done it. I had not. I submitted a formal records request for 7 years of transaction history on the joint account and the secondary family fund account. I cited my authorized status. I provided identification. I asked for certified printed statements, not just a digital export. The bank confirmed the request would take 7 to 10 business days. I told David that evening. He asked if I was sure I wanted to see it. I said I needed to know what was real. The statements arrived on a Thursday. I signed for the envelope at the door. I set it on the kitchen table and made coffee before I opened it. I remember thinking, would you have done the same? Or would you have left the envelope sealed and told yourself it was better not to know? I opened it. I want to explain how I got the statements because people always ask this. My parents' primary bank was one I had been a customer of for over a decade. When my father had a minor health scare 3 years prior, my parents had added me as an authorized party on their joint account, not with spending access, but with the ability to request records if something happened to them. It was a practical decision made with good intentions. They had forgotten they'd done it. I had not. I submitted a formal records request for 7 years of transaction history on the joint account and the secondary family fund account. I cited my authorized status. I provided identification. I asked for certified printed statements, not just a digital export. The bank confirmed the request would take 7 to 10 business days. I told David that evening. He asked if I was sure I wanted to see it. I said I needed to know what was real. The statements arrived on a Thursday. I signed for the envelope at the door. I set it on the kitchen table and made coffee before I opened it. I remember thinking, would you have done the same? Or would you have left the envelope sealed and told yourself it was better not to know? I opened it. By the end of that Saturday, I had read through all 7 years. I built the same kind of spreadsheet I always build when I need to think clearly. Date, amount, account, description where available. The numbers were not ambiguous. Over 7 years, my parents had transferred money to Marcus, directly by check, by electronic transfer, and on 4 occasions by cashier's check, totaling, across all transactions I could document, $91,400. I sat with that number for a long time. $91,000. In the same 7-year window, there was one transfer to me. A single one. For $800. My mother had sent it the week after my father's health scare, with a note that said, just in case, love mom. One transfer. $800. I went back to year 1. I found the month my mother told me they were stretched thin. The same month she explained about medical expenses and said she was sorry about the tuition. Transaction. $6,200. Payee. Marcus J. Transfer. Date. September 4th. That was 11 days before her phone call to me. I documented everything with the kind of deliberateness that only comes from deciding you will not be dismissed. I cross-referenced every transfer against any explanation I could remember being given over the years. The business that didn't work out. The lease. The job gap. The car loan. I matched dates to stories. Some of the transfers had no story I had ever been told. They were simply money moving quietly from my parents to my brother, in amounts that ranged from $800 to $12,000 across 81 separate transactions over 7 years. I printed everything. I organized it by year, then by cumulative total. I wrote a clean 1-page summary, no emotional language, no accusations. Just the documented record. Documented receipt. Transaction. $12,000. Date. February 17th. Payee. Marcus J. Cashier's check. Same week. Mother told me they couldn't swing, helping with home repair costs. I also pulled my own loan history from that 7-year period. Graduate school debt. The home repair I had covered alone. The gap year when David was between jobs that we had navigated entirely by ourselves. I placed all of it in a folder. I called my mother and asked if we could have a family dinner. She said she'd been hoping I'd suggest that. I don't think she knew what I meant by it. The dinner was at my parents' house on a Saturday evening. My mother had made the kind of meal she makes when she wants things to feel normal. Pot roast, the good dishes, candles on the table. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late. His girlfriend wasn't with him. He kissed my mother on the cheek and shook my father's hand and sat down like it was any other Saturday. David sat beside me. He knew everything. He had read the summary page and said 3 words. Whenever you're ready. We ate. We talked. My father asked about a project I was managing at work. Marcus talked about a new opportunity he was considering. My mother refilled glasses and smiled at the right moments. I let the meal run its course. When my mother started to clear the dessert plates, I said I had something I wanted to share with everyone. The table stilled. I placed the folder in front of me. I opened it to the summary page and slid it to the center of the table. I said, I requested 7 years of statements from the joint account and the family fund. I'm an authorized party. Dad added me 3 years ago. I've had time to go through everything carefully. My father looked at the page. My mother sat back down slowly. Marcus said, What is this? His voice was steady, but his eyes moved to my father first, not to me. That told me something. I said, It's a documented record of transfers from your accounts over 7 years. 81 transactions. $91,000 for $100, all to Marcus. I paused. In the same period, I received 1 transfer. $800. The room was warm. The candles were still burning. My mother's hand was flat on the tablecloth, and she was looking at the summary page without picking it up. My father said, Mara, just my name. Nothing attached to it. I slid a second page across. The year-by-year breakdown. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock exactly. It was the silence of people who had been carrying something and suddenly understood that someone else in the room had been carrying it too, but in a completely different way. My mother's eyes filled. She didn't speak. My father picked up the summary page. He read it slowly. He set it down. He picked up the year-by-year breakdown. He read that too. Marcus said, Mom and Dad offered. I didn't take anything that wasn't given. I said, I know. And I meant that. I did know. This was never solely about Marcus. He had accepted what was offered. The accounting I needed wasn't with him. I looked at my father. I said, The month I took out my graduate school loan, there was a $12,000 cashier's check to Marcus 11 days before Mom called me to say you were stretched thin. Transaction. $12,000. February 17th. Cashier's check. Pay. Marcus J. Mom's call to me. February 28th. We just can't swing it this semester, sweetheart. My father closed his eyes. That was the moment. Not anger. Not denial. Just a man who understood that the record had been read and could not be unread. My mother said, We thought you were okay. I said, I was. I made myself okay. But you didn't ask. Marcus left early. He said he needed some air. He shook my father's hand again at the door, which struck me as strange, formal, like he was leaving a meeting. His mother tried to hug him, and he let her, briefly. He didn't say anything to me on his way out. That was fine. My parents and I sat at that table for another 2 hours. Not arguing. Not reconstructing blame. Just talking for the first time, honestly, about what the last 7 years had actually looked like from where I was standing. My father said, We told ourselves you were the strong one. I said, I was strong because I had to be. My mother said she didn't know how to fix it. I told her I wasn't there to be fixed. I was there because I needed them to see the real picture, not the one where everything was fair because nobody was complaining. By the end of the evening, my parents had committed to 2 things. First, a formal conversation with a financial advisor about their retirement accounts, which Marcus's withdrawals had quietly diminished more than they'd acknowledged to themselves. Second, a direct conversation with Marcus about what repayment, in any form, might look like. I didn't demand either of those things. They offered them. That distinction mattered to me. There are things I still sit with. Not resentment exactly. Something more like a recalibration. A quiet understanding of how families build narratives that protect the peace at the expense of the truth, and how those narratives compound interest over years until the gap between what people believe and what the records show becomes almost impossible to bridge in a single conversation. I think about that graduate school loan. I finished paying it off 2 years ago. I remember the last payment and how ordinary it felt, how I didn't mark it, didn't tell anyone, just moved the money and updated my budget spreadsheet and went on with the day. I think about my mother's voice on that phone call 7 years ago. She wasn't lying to hurt me. She was managing. She was keeping things moving. She was doing what she had always done, which was give Marcus what he needed and trust that I would handle the rest. She wasn't wrong about what I would do. She was wrong about what it cost. The 7 years of statements didn't give me back anything material. I wasn't looking for repayment. I was looking for acknowledgement, for the record to exist in a room where everyone could see it, for the story my family had been telling about fairness to meet the story the numbers had been keeping all along. Those two stories had never been in the same room before that Saturday evening. Now they had been. And something about that, the simple fact of the record being read out loud, in the presence of the people it concerned, felt like enough. Documentation doesn't raise your voice for you. It doesn't need to. It just holds the truth in place until you're ready to place it on the table. I was ready, and the statements had been waiting patiently for 7 years. Subscribe for more family stories where the truth eventually finds the table.